Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tanzu Tuesdays, either again or for the first time. And if it's your first time, well, hopefully you'll come back. Um, so if you haven't seen our website before, if you just go to tanzu.tv, and that's all, it'll go to the tanzu.tv section of our VMware Tanzu Developer Center. So you can see all the shows that we have for Tanzu Tuesdays. We have code, which is like Spring and Java coding, and they go through that. So just full on live demos, and those are on Wednesdays. And we have several other shows that happen at different times on different days of the week. And most all of them are repeating basically every single week. So for Tanzu Tuesdays, which is again this one, next week we have Gerhard Lazu and David Ansari, and I'm probably messing up names. But the title is RabbitMQ as a problem. Let us tell you about that. And so right now that is not up on the page, but it will be in the next few minutes. So if you just wait a little bit and go check it out, you'll be able to see the details for next week's episode. And again, if you haven't been here in a little bit, our episodes are now at noon on Pacific time instead of at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So today we have Glenn Renfro. So hi, Glenn.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing this fine day?
It's still so weird. I haven't got used to the whole like not being able to hear other people responding to you.
I know, isn't it? It's like, where's the audience? They're there. You know, they're looking at me just through this one beautiful camera. And I'm going, hey, everybody. So
like I'm admiring like the water that you're just being like levitating in right now. Where is your backdrop from?
What you don't know is I'm actually floating in a kayak in Manatee Springs, Florida, as we speak. Yes, so if I see like I'm rocking back and forth, it means there's probably another kayak or boat that just went behind me. So don't worry, this means this is normal. But no, this is actually one of the places I like to kayak. It's off the Swanee River, and my daughter and I regularly like to about 2-3 times a year like to go down and kayak various springs and rivers in Florida. And we just went in early May, and it was the first time we'd been in over a year. We got vaccinated and things were safe to do it. So we went, and it was an awesome experience. So I was kind of glad to get outside a little bit and do some kayaking. So that's one of the things I do. Also enjoy gardening. And that's actually how I listen to a lot of my podcasts and my technical podcasts is when I garden or fish, put the earbuds in and just let the information flow from the internet into my brain. And yes, gardening, both plants and fish do appreciate tech podcasts more than just about any other type of podcast. They really take to it.
Yeah, I've never gotten kayaking, but I have done like canoeing and whitewater rafting, which are both fun, but kayaking is on my to-do. Oh, and I guess is it paddleboarding? Well, I did paddleboarding. I spent more than half the time in the water.
So you're like me. I tried paddleboarding too, and I live near the Chattahoochee River. I think the river dropped about 1 inch because I kept swallowing various parts as I kept falling in. So yes, my experience is very similar on the paddleboarding side.
Yeah, I've tried it twice, and like someone I know is like, yeah, we should go do that. And I was like, well, I'll be in the water a lot, but if it's not freezing cold, I guess, sure, why not?
Kayaking is a little bit more relaxed. I'll put it this way, the people who paddleboard and they get into it, they love it. Unfortunately, my balance isn't that good. So when I buy a kayak, I always make sure it's one of the ones that stays fair. You know, it says the word has to be written on it somewhere, stable. So that's my prerequisite for buying a kayak is stable. So
that's how you're making sure that your laptop currently is not falling in the water.
That is exactly it. So like I said, don't worry about the rocking back and forth. That's just me enjoying the water. So I'm sorry. If y'all haven't figured out, I can be led astray by miles. So, If Tiffany, if you see me start going off in a direction, just pull me back in. Say, Glenn, data flow, Glenn, SpringCloud, Glenn, Spring integration. Come on, bring it back in, hone it in, and I'll come back in.
Okay. I guess that's part of what I'm here for, right?
That's right.
Need to be
keep
a
me
little
in.
bit useful.
I think you're doing a great job. So you're doing good.
Thank you. But yeah, so I guess what's your favorite place in the world?
Oh my goodness.
Or one of them at least.
Well, oh man, that is a very good question. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably going to be one of two places, and one is going to be, of course, the spring aspect of it is to go to Manatee Springs. I enjoy the clarity of the water. I'm going to change that. It's Silver Springs because I can kayak Silver Springs, and when you kayak it, you can be floating in about 30 meters of water, and you look straight down and it's crystal clear. The temperature is 71 degrees Fahrenheit year round. And just the dynamic of the colors of the sky to the green trees to the blue water is just amazing. And they opened it up to kayakers about 5 years ago, I think. And that's one of my regular haunts to like to go through and kayak a day there. So just a beautiful opportunity to just be. So that's one of my
I'll have
favorite
to
places to
try that
be.
sometime. And to
So
redirect back to Tots Tuesdays, if you go look for next week's episode, it is now up. Thank you, Brian McLean, for being my code code in this case, README merger. So yeah, how about we go over into what you do at VMware and have you get started.
I think that's going to be awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. So folks, I'm going to go ahead and pop a slide up here. Yes, you're going to have slides. I apologize. I will try to keep them to a minimum. See, thanks. We're already done. We could go ahead and go home, right?
Woo!
Yoo-hoo! I like
Nap
that.
time.
That's efficiency, right?
That was the fastest talk I've seen. Wow, you are just so speedy.
Everybody's knowledge is in place. And I mean, really, I honed it down. That's what it is. I said 1 minute. Well, folks, who am I? I am Glenn Renfro. I work for VMware. I'm on the Spring R&D team, even though they're kind of like, really, you work on it? I'm like, yeah, I do. And it's a lot of fun. I am working on SpringCloud Task. I work on SpringCloud Data Flow. That means I'm a contributor, committer on it. I'm also on Spring Batch along with Michael Manila and Mahmoud Basim, and really exciting projects. I kind of work more on like the ephemeral side of Spring. It does, and what that basically means, I work on the short-lived app side, so things that start up, work, and then terminate on their own. So that's kind of my specialty right now, but I'm doing a little bit more things because you're going to see where there's some code I actually wrote for SpringCloud Stream. Yes, even though Oleg may go, oh my gosh, Glenn's writing using my stuff, and gets like, don't let him near it. But in truth, I work on whatever project they need me. So I'm kind of like wherever they need me to go, I work on. And my copious free time when I'm not kayaking, fishing, working in the garden, or being a dad to my kids and a husband to my wife. I am also on the board of directors of the Atlanta Java Users Group, which also means that I'm also on the board of directors for DevNexus, which is, I think, about the second largest, if not the largest, Java conference, solely specific around the Java JDK ecosystem in the North America. So lots of exciting stuff that I get to play with and get to engage with folks on the community. I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Tiffany and Tanzu Tuesday for inviting me to be here to talk about orchestrating data pipelines. Now you're going to say, oh man, that sounds like an ad. The answer is no, it's not an ad. And don't worry about the version 1.0 May 2021. This is version 1.0 of this talk, not version 1.0 of Dataflow. Dataflow is currently at 2.7, about to come out with 2.8. So what is SpringCloud Dataflow? Basically what we're talking about, and we're going to be kind of going in, is we're going to talk about some use cases. of both eventing and how we want to handle event-based applications, and how we want to orchestrate those, as well as how do we handle these batch applications, or what we're going to call ephemeral applications. How do we deploy and orchestrate these out into a cloud ecosystem, right? And we're then, after we kind of talk about that a little bit, we're going to go into a grammar lesson. Is everybody excited about a grammar lesson? Okay, the silence speaks volumes. Okay, so with that being said, it's basically, I was talking to one of our tech writers at VMware, and we had this great discussion on transformational grammar. And it's kind of, we had a little bit of fun with it. And I said, you know what, I think this will make a great like a little app, app to play with, to kind of show you what you can do with streams and data flow. Then we're going to create a stream. And then we're going to update a stream app. We're going to show you, discuss what SpringCloud Stream is, what it does, and a little app that kind of expresses what that is. And then we're going to talk about launching and monitoring our batch applications. We're going to create a Spring Boot ephemeral app, and we're going to launch it from Dataflow and watch it error out, kind of play with it and have some fun with it, right? So, and then after that, feel free to ask questions. I don't have it, but Tiffany said she would relay them to me, so you can ask questions as we go through. And if we start running a little bit shy on time, I might ask her to hold them to the end. But as we're going through, ask questions. Let's see what we got out there and see what people really want to talk about. So first thing is we get data. We get data of all sorts of shapes and sizes, right? We get data that's like JSON, right? Binaries, flat files. Oh, and yes, we even get stuff that's still XML formatted. I mean, really, this stuff really goes the gambit. But not only do we get this variety of data, we also comes in various sizes, right? Everything from a little tweet to petabytes in data. And we need to be able to process that data. But this data comes from different forms and different places, or sorry, not different forms, but different places, right? I could be receiving from our greatest and latest systems that are both in our infrastructure as well as outside our infrastructure, maybe in a cloud ecosystem, right? But I also could be getting some data from systems that might be just a little old. And this little box is the first box I ever coded on. And if you happen to know what it is, you get free bonus points. Those bonus points are worth absolutely what you think they're worth, and you can use them wherever you think you can use them. Okay, they're nowhere, but it's great to just know you can get bonus points for knowing what that machine is, right? But so we may get these information from older systems, meaning like mainframes, right? But now I can also get data from external resources available via from the internet. Like we can think about IoT devices. We can think about social media, right? That's hence the little subscribe button there, right? And this data is available in two different methods. I can have a data feed like the Twitter Firehose feeding me this data as it's coming in, or I can have data that's out there at rest that I can pull in as I need as that's available. So we see that we get data from different locations, different sizes, different shapes, and different resources to receive that data. So the two styles of data that we're going to be dealing with today is, again, eventing. Data that's coming in live. And we're going to have applications or streams that are going to be up and receiving this data. These applications are what we're going to call LRPs, or long-running processes. Basically, these apps they are activated, they stay up, and what they're going to do is they're going to receive this information. And they don't stop until an external agent goes in there and turns them off, right? That external agent could be something that says, hey, you need to be refreshed because we're updating your certificates, or we're going to repave you, or me as a developer says, you know what, guess what, or as a user, I'm going to update the version of this application. So these apps stay up and they're always running. And this information they're receiving, we're going to begin with starting out with a scenario here, right? A classic scenario is that we have a football game, right? And the football game is one of the biggest in the world, right? And during this football game, we're going to be a pizza vendor. And what we're going to do is we're going to be listening for events from maybe, like I said, a Twitter Firehose. And we want to create a stream that's going to capture every event or every tweet, if you will, for the entire life cycle of our of that game, right? And we want to store that. Now you're like, why would you want to store that information? Because in the future, I may want to go back and do some data research on that data and be able to go back in and look at it historically. But as that data is coming in, I want to, you know, implement some taps on that data. I want to tap off of that data and be able to receive and maybe filter and transform that data. And filter meaning maybe I want things that people are talking about, pizza or food or our name or our competitor's name. And because we want to be able to catch those impressions that are coming from our customers that are talking on social media about the game, but more importantly about being hungry, right? And so what we may do is if we see there's enough chiming in and people are talking about it enough, what we could do is say, okay, we're going to start a campaign. If the team, one of the teams scores a point in the next 5 or 10 minutes, right, we're going to give you a bonus code that you can get in and get your pizza half off and see how that drives impressions, right? So these are things that both we can capture data for storage, but also be able to capture that data and be able to handle that data live, right? And to be able to take and get that to our decision makers so that we can affect change as it comes in. But the other thing we can do is we have another style of applications called ephemeral. And ephemeral applications are applications that start, they do something, and they terminate. And you could think of these as batch applications. And the advantage to these is they do what? They wake up based on an event. That event could be me launching it myself. It could be a scheduler that's going in there and launching it, or it could be receiving an event from what? One of our events up here that I showed you, one of our event apps that it will in turn kick off a batch job. And what these things do is they'll wake up, they will pick up data at rest, and then they will process that and they will push data to maybe a database, to another flat file, or what? Send data out into an eventing infrastructure. So we can see how these two work together to be able to handle active data and data that is at rest. But why just keep it that simple? I'm going to throw something else in there, right? What I want to also show you is that what if I could be able to run my apps not only on-premise, but also in the cloud, or also in maybe a hybrid, right? You know, both we're using cloud and also our infrastructure, but also you can't have a presentation these days unless I use the following word, right? Kubernetes, right? I've got to say it. I think it's a rule in all presentation handbooks. Yep, rule 27. I've got to say the word Kubernetes at least 10 times. Okay, 2 down, I got to say 8 more times. Very good, there we go. So in this case, but we also, we're deploying our apps out to things like Taz, or if you will, what was formerly called Cloud Foundry. We could be deploying them to our infrastructure on Linux, but also to Kubernetes and Kubernetes clusters. So what we're looking at is we got this mixture of services out there, and we want to be able to create and orchestrate streams for our venting and tasks for our ephemeral apps, right? So let's dig in a little bit and talk about the components, the apps that we are going to be building, right? Currently what we could do is if I wanted to make a event-based application, right? What I would do is I could take and use Spring Boot, right? Our all-time favorite. And in that case, I'd bring in a Spring integration starter dependency. What does that do for me? Spring integration is an implementation of what we call the enterprise integration patterns. It was a book that talked about released, 15 years ago now at least. And basically what it is, it showed you the various ways data can flow through your applications. So if you haven't had a chance to read it and you're kind of new to the industry, or maybe been in the industry a while and you haven't seen this book, I highly recommend picking up because it's still valuable today on showing how data can flow through your applications. In this case, what is Spring integration? Spring integration is the implementation of these enterprise integration patterns. So that would be great for streaming-based application, right? But this app never lives in isolation. It's going to be talking with what? Other applications out there, other stream apps, right? So in this case, I want to be able to communicate with them, but I want to communicate where we don't lose our messages, right? These messages contain valuable data. I don't want to lose them. So I want to have them communicated through a a uh, a information framework, right? And so this information framework, what I want to be able to do is use something like maybe Kafka, right? Or RabbitMQ, like what we're going to hear about next week, right? Or Google PubSub, right? And that's going to be our transport layer. That's the thing that we want to make sure that once I have like an HTTP source, right? Something that's going to receive data via HTTP, and it says, hey, I've got this data. I want to transport it to a processor. And so I'm going to drop this onto a Kafka topic or if you will, a RabbitMQ exchange. And then we're going to have a processor that's going to pick that data up off of that topic or exchange, and it's going to transform it, enrich it. What else could it do to it? Filter it. And then once it finishes that, it's going to put it onto another Kafka topic or RabbitMQ exchange. And then we're going to have a sink on the other side. And that sink's going to take and say, I'm going to say, hey, I'll store this data off into a database. Or, hey, I might do some emailing or whatever it's going to do. But it'll be the terminating point of the stream. But what we see is I've brought up 3 terms, or actually 4 terms. Source, something that receives data, a processor, something that's going to change and transform the data, and a sink, something that's going to take and terminate that data and either store it, send it off, or do some final work with it. But again, these 3 basic or 4 components are what I want you to know: source, processor, sink, and transport layer. But we also talk about data at rest. So I could bring up a Spring Boot application and pick up data from a database, right? Process that data, filter it, do all sorts of magic, and write it out to maybe a MongoDB. Or, like I said, maybe take that data and drop it onto a topic, right? For a Kafka topic or a RabbitMQ exchange. But while I could write that, that's me writing a lot of code. Why would I want to do that? Maybe I want to take advantage of something called Spring Batch. And what Spring Batch does is it allows me many services, but one of the services it offers is give you a bunch of builders for readers and writers. And then by using these builders, all I have to do is, instead of writing my reader that's going to read from a JDBC and then a writer that's going to write it out to, like I said, the Kafka topic, I can use these builders and just use and configure them to create my reader and my writer. It offers, oh gosh, I forgot how many different reads and writers, but it's got like JDBC reader writers, Kafka reader writers, flat file reader writers, Mongo reader writers, oh my gosh, the list goes, RabbitMQ reader writers. It's got this whole list, and you can mix and match it. I can have, like I said, read from a AMQP exchange and write that out to, or have it write the results out to a MongoDB. It's really what you want to do. But what's cool about it is I could do that by configuration. The only code I really have to write is the processor piece, the piece that you inject in there to say, how do I want to transform that data? How do I want to enrich this data? Whatever it is. So only code I have to really write in that case, outside the configuring of the reader and the writer, is that piece. But what's also valuable about Spring Batch is that it handles the transactions for me. So again, I don't have to write the transaction logic. I can configure that. And the other thing that you get with Spring Batch, with a little bit of with configuration and just a little bit of code, if my batch app fails, let's say I'm running a 4-hour batch app, at hour 2 it fails, what I can do is restart my batch app. Let's say I ran out of table space. Always happens. Somehow it always happens. At hour 2 around table space, well, I can go out and clear out tables, add additional table space, and then restart that batch up, and it'll pick up at that record that it failed at. So you have all these wonderful features that Spring has given us to help us save time when we're writing our code. But Spring said, you know what, we can make life a little easier, right? And so what we're going to do, I went a little bit far there, is that SpringCloud, we created something called SpringCloud Stream. And SpringCloud Stream works on top of Spring integration. So what it does is, now instead of me having to write code to integrate, again, Spring Kafka saves me a lot of time, but what if I just want to focus on a function? Like in a few minutes, we're going to be writing a processor. And in that processor, I just want to read a string, process that string, and then write it out. And so I want to focus on a function. SpringCloud Stream allows me to do that. It says, look, if you provide the function, tell us what function you want us to use. We'll integrate that. And all you have to do is write the function and include the SpringCloud Stream starter dependency and a SpringCloud Stream starter binder dependency of whatever transport you're using. Again, it's Kafka, RabbitMQ, Google PubSub, Amazon's. I forgot what Amazon calls theirs, but we have a whole list of transports that you can select from. And what will happen is it'll auto configure your Spring Stream app to hook into that transport. So all I have to do is worry about my business problem. And so we'll even show you what that looks like in a few minutes. So going back down to Spring Batch, we said, okay, so now we can take and deploy our apps into any kind of environment like we talked about before, cloud hybrid, or on-prem. But then we said, what if we could, take a batch app? Is there something we can do to make life easier for our developers out there who are running these in a cloud ecosystem? We said, well, yes, there is. We created SpringCloud Task. And what this means is that when I run my batch apps, let's say I'm running my batch app on a Kubernetes, and I'm running on Kubernetes, and I'm running it like in, I can run it in one of 5 clusters based on maybe the size of the app, and we choose which cluster we're going to be, our apps are running at. But we want one location where we want to check the status of how our batch or our tasks are running, right? SpringCloud Task allows us because it will record into one location, whatever you tell us, like in this case, a database, one location. It will always make sure it says my app, my batch app or SpringCloud Task app or boot app started. It tells you what time it started, what time it finished. It tells you what exit code it had. It tells you exit message. If it failed, it captures the exception and records exception. So you can go look in that one location and check the status of how all my tasks are doing across our ecosystem. So it helps us save time there, but it also gives some build-ons on top of, and works well with Spring Batch, because what it does is it hooks in and says, okay, if I can take from a Spring Cloud Task app, again, which is, we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. A Spring Cloud Task app is nothing more than a Spring Boot app that may or may not use Spring Batch, and you add the add enable task annotation, and it will record that information for you. But also what it does is that you can enable it a property on it that says, if this instance of this task is already running, don't start. Then that by default, it says you can run as many instances of this task as you want, no problem. But if I set that to true, it will prevent this task from running if it's already running somewhere else. The other things it can do is, as the batch app is running, the batch app can emit messages, and we can take those messages and be able to put them onto a Kafka topic or a AMQP exchange, because basically it hooks into SpringCloud Stream and will send that information out to wherever you want it to go if you decide to enable that feature. There's a lot of features in SpringCloud Task. Take a look, and we'll be giving a brief overview of that in a few minutes. So I know I've been talking a lot about SpringCloud Stream, SpringCloud Task, and how they work independently and how to write them. But how can I orchestrate a stream or my tasks? What do I mean by that? I'm not just running one stream out in the ecosystem. I'm going to be running maybe hundreds or thousands of streams. How do I make sure that all my streams are running? How do I update a stream when I need to maybe do a security update on it or update the version on it? How can I manage that? Conversely, if I'm running a batch app, I'm not running just one batch app or one SpringCloud Task app. I'm running hundreds or thousands of them. And again, SpringCloud Task records that information in a database, but is there a place that I can go to just check it easily and also be able to check the status of my tasks by using maybe a UI or a shell or RESTful API to be able to take a look at those? And if it is running batch and I have a batch failure, how can I restart it? SpringCloud Dataflow gives us those features. In short, you can take a screenshot of this if you like, but if you think about it, what SpringCloud Dataflow does is it supports a range of data processing use cases from ETL to import-export to event streaming to predictive analytics. And what it does is allows me to be able to create these pipelines, these streams, these tasks, and be able to manage them throughout their entire ecosystem, right? Their ecosystem, in our ecosystem through their lifespan. So we're about to go ahead and hit demo mode. But before I go demo mode, I want to discuss our scenario. So we're going to talk about transformational grammar. If you want to, you can take a big screenshot of this. I wanted to give you the full explanation of what that is. But simply, a transformational grammar says I can create new sentences from pieces of existing sentences. What's an example of this? An example. Glenn is an earthling. If you haven't noticed, I'm a sci-fi nut too, on top of being a kayaker, right? A sci-fi kayaker. But in this case, I can change this by using the same pieces of this or elements of this sentence. I can change it. Is Glenn an earthling? So again, we can look at, I can use transformational grammar to take two bits of this string, which it is a string, yes, this sentence, and transform it into a completely different meaning. So some scenarios. Are we earthlings? Of course we are earthlings. Is Glenn a human? Of course Glenn is a human. Glenn is a typical earthling? I'm not so sure about that, right? So what do we want to do? What's our demo here? We're going to do two things. We're going to create a stream. And what I want to do is I want to send in some JSON to an HTTP source. Remember, source, processor, sync. They're going to be hooked together through a RabbitMQ as our transport. And I'm going to take and receive this information on port 5000. I'm going to send it to a transformer, and it's going to take my question, is Glenn a human? Are we earthlings? And change them to statements using kind of those basic premises of transformational grammar to, instead of are we humans, to we are humans, right? And then once it does that, it's going to store that out into a JDBC data store. But if there is something in there that's a legal syntax, it's going to filter it out. It won't try to handle it. It's just going to filter it out. So that'll be part one. And for our simple task scenario, we're going to read from that table. We're going to take those results. And what we're going to do is we're going to write those out to a Slack channel. So what we're going to be able to do is be able to take and read the results of what we did and send it to a Slack channel using a Spring Boot application. So some stuff is a little bit fun. So with that being said, I think it's time for demo time. So let's go there. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring up our transformation grammar. So do you remember when I said that when you create a SpringCloud stream app, you only need to focus on adding 2 bits, right? 2 dependencies. The dependencies, mind you, I still have our, there we go. What we have is we have our typical Spring Boot app Maven here. And we see that I'm going to be the parent is always going to be Spring Boot starter parent. We see that we're going to use an actuator. It's going to be a web app. We're going to have our tests, right? But then we see the last 2 bits right here. We're going to have our stream, and we're going to have our binder for our rabbit. And then we also have to remember that SpringCloud Stream is going to help us out a little bit. It gives you a testing suite to go with it. So when we write our tests, it gives us those tools to hook in and make our life a lot easier. So they did a great job on this project. So what else does that mean? So let's look at our code, and our code looks like this. It's a function. It is a simple transform function. In this case, we're expecting a string as input, a string as output, and we can see that I am just going in and I'm calling a method called parse message, which is basically an object mapper that reads in the JSON, converts it to a message object, and a message object is just a data, has one field in it, data string. All this code is available on my GitHub repo, and we could show you, actually I could show you, I'll go back that slide and show you where that's at. That just says if it starts with are we always write out we are. And same way was is Glenn, and to Glenn is, unless it has the word typical in it, then we kind of leave it, is Glenn a typical human, right? Kind of that little bit of humor. And we see that if we didn't transform it at all, we're going to hand back a null. And that's SpringCloud stream way of saying if you hand a result null, you're effectively filtering it. So we're not going to send anything forward that we can't transform. So with that being said, the only other thing that I wanted to show you is that we need to tell SpringCloud stream what's the name of the method that or function that you're going to use. What's the in and out? We have it called input and output for the transform. And with that being said, let's compile it. Actually, I can zoom in on that so I can see that a little better. Ooh, there we go. And down here, I'm going to do Maven. Move that over there. Package. And we're going to build it. And we'll see that it goes through builds. Yay. And we see it successfully builds. Yay. Okay. Now we finally get to SpringCloud data flow. SpringCloud data flow, it's right here, is basically a application, and we're going to use its UI today. And SpringCloud data flow out of the box has no real applications associated with it, but we have this project called SpringCloud Stream Applications, which is a bunch of predefined microservices out there that you can take. You can pull the projects in, you can use them, or you can use the binaries. It's up to you. And what we have given you as a convenience method is we can preload those. And what we're saying here is I want all the SpringCloud Stream apps that that implement the RabbitMQ binder and are Maven. So Dataflow says, look, we don't launch your applications and run them internally to add Dataflow. What Dataflow does is it says, you tell us where your app is, where your artifacts for your apps are. If it's Maven, HTTP, flat file system, Docker, what we'll do is we'll in turn take those and launch those on whatever platform you are. So if you're running on Kubernetes or Cloud Foundry or Taz, or on your local file system, we'll launch these apps and hook them together and deploy them directly to whatever platform you want. In this case, I'm using my local machine, and I'm going to be using RabbitMQ as the binder for my stream apps, and they will be using Maven as the where their artifacts are stored. So in that case, I've just told Dataflow, I've registered them, and I've included told Dataflow that's where they are. So I've added all my stream apps. Now I'm going to go back in. I'm going to do the same for our task apps. Again, there's going to be coming from a Maven repo. You can specify whatever Maven repo you want. Right now, this is just coming off of Maven Central. And so sorry, my speaker just went out. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and we've registered those. And we're going to go to streams. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our first stream. We're going to create a stream definition, right? And the stream definition is basically how we want to declare our stream to flow. So we're going to look for HTTP. I can drag and drop. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. My gosh, I forgot to register our application that we created. Dataflow doesn't know about that yet, does it? So what we want to do now is actually go back up here. We're going to add our processor that we created, and we're going to call it TGG transform. Okay. And it's going to be our type processor. And I am not going to write that out because I guarantee you I will mess it up. But I'll put this right here. And I'm going to import. And basically, this is just pointing to my file system. So I just want to show you that. So I'm saying basically, here's where my jar is. And I'm pointing to using a file system. So you can see I can both use Maven, file, Docker. It's up to you. So let's go back to create our stream definition. And we're going to go to, again, HTTP. We're going to look for TGG transform. I'm going to link those two together. And I want to have a JDBC sync right here. There we go. Now I have all this good stuff here, but I need to configure it, right? Where's my database coming from? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit. So I know some things about my database. I want to put in all the basic information except for the password. So what I can do through Dataflow is I can come in here and I can specify it by adding it directly to my DDL or my DSL up here. So you can see I have my driver name, username, URL. I can go in, and if I wanted to, I could go to options, like on here, like I want to listen on port 5000 for my HTTP. So I can put it here by just clicking on the UI. So we can do it whatever way you like, right? Oops, 500. How about 5000? In that case, so I'm listening on port 5000, and here's where my database credentials are, except for my password, right? And I can create the stream. And when I create the stream, I'll call it TGG stream or transform. There we go. I'll create that stream. And we have created a stream. Now, it has not been deployed. It hasn't been launched yet. It's just creating the definition. But now let's go ahead and create that definition. And we're going to go ahead and click deploy. And the one thing we wanted to add was what? We want to go in and add our password. So what we're going to do is at deployment time now, I'm going to set that because I didn't want to store it, right? I want to keep that secret. And I can add that password right here. And my secret password is, if y'all haven't guessed, password. So in this case, what we're going to do is deploy the stream. And we can see that SpringCloud Dataflow is deploying that stream. No, I don't have to worry about that. And we can go here to runtime and check the status of how our elements are being deployed. And we see they're still deploying. And because I've got a lot of stuff running on my machine, there we go. We see the TGG transform has deployed. We can actually go back to streams here. We can actually go in. Let me slide over here. We can see that it's telling me I can look in aggregate. I can actually go in and see how it looks here. But we'll go back to runtime. Oops. And we can see that it's all deployed. We go back to streams and we can see the status is deployed. So yay, we've got a deployed stream, but that's only part of a story. We want to send data through it. So let's go ahead and send some data through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a curl. And I'm going to bring up our TG transform here. And I'm going to curl some messages across. And now let's go check our database. We can see, actually, I was supposed to show you that there was nothing there. I was supposed to clear that out. Oh, well, it's already done it for me. So there we go. We see that we've already got our data already there. I can actually truncate that table. And go back over there. And then run that query again. We shouldn't have anything. And we will resend all this data. There we go. And now we will rerun that message right here. There we go. And we see the data is there. And we see that the code worked as we expected. I can't zoom that in, so we'll have to know that Glenn said we are Earthlings, we are human, and then the only thing we didn't change is Glenn, a typical Earthling, which we know. Glenn is not a typical Earthling. So with that being said, we see how we've created our first stream, how we created our first app. But I want to show you one more thing before we get too far down the road. Is I want to show you how I can upgrade a stream. So in that case, let's go back to our project here, right? And I'm just going to create version 0.0.1.2, okay? And what we're going to do in this case, we're going to do a Maven package. And we'll do one more build here. And we're going to do an ls-al target. And we should have what, version 1 and version 2. So let's go back to Dataflow and tell it about, hey, Dataflow, we've got a second version of our app. So let's go do that. Let's go back to applications. Again, once you add your app, you're good. You don't have to keep re-adding it. I'm showing you all the good stuff, right? So in this case, we're going to update our application. And what we're going to do, again, is I want to tell Dataflow that here is where I want you to get here your transform. It is a processor. And what we want to do is change this to 0.0.2. And it's on the file system again. We're going to import that. But what we want to see here specifically, let's go look for it, that now we have 2 versions, where I guess I should show you where before we had 1. But now what I can do is go back to my stream. I can go back and say update. And then I can go in and tell Dataflow, hey, I want you to use 0.2 version, not the 0.0.1. Click Update Stream. Then we can go back, look at our runtime. We can see that even Dataflow says, hey, you're cycling through one. These two are good, but one is being updated. And we can see that we're deploying just that one element. So through Dataflow, and we can see now that it's up. We can go back to stream, see everything is up, and we can see that we're deployed. So through Dataflow, not only can I create streams, design streams with multiple sources, multiple processors, multiple sinks, I can also go into each of these streams and update them as I need and as we see fit. But there's one more demo we want to do for y'all before we call it a day. I know you're like, Glenn, I'm demoed out. Why more demos? Because Glenn likes to demo. Okay, maybe not demo all the time. I like to code a lot. So let's go to Slack boot. So Slack boot, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this creature? Well, Slack boot, I'm going to scroll up a little bit and let's zoom in a little bit. And it's a Spring Boot application. So we could see that it is a Spring Boot application. It's going to be ephemeral because I'm going to be using application runner. It's going to start, do something, and terminate. Classic case of ephemeral application. In this case, what it's going to do, let's look at the properties, is that it's going to have one property you can set with the URL to my Slack. And what it's going to do is it's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to retrieve the data. Let me zoom in here a little bit. And it's going to retrieve the data right here from a database. It's a basic query statement here. And then once it requests that information, it's going to post that information to Slack in a JSON format. Nothing major, really simple, okay? But with that being said, let's go ahead and build it. Clean package. And once again, it does the build, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to, while it runs, I'm going to do a copy paste. So again, I'm pulling this from file system. And we can go there. Go back, oops, wrong one, sorry. Slack boot. And we're going to go back to Dataflow. But this time on Dataflow, instead of going to streams, we're going to go to, actually got to go to applications. Again, I'm creating these, adding them. Again, you don't have to do them, add them all the time, right? Just when you're, for the first time. And this one we're going to call Slack boot. It is a task. And here's its location. Again, I'm pulling it just from my file system. And we can just get rid of that filter and tell it we want to look at our tasks, and we can see that we've added Slack boot. So I'm going to go to tasks now, and I'm going to create what? A task definition. Much like we saw before, oops, wrong one. I'm going to do drag and drop. And we're going to connect the start and to the end. And you're going to ask, well, if it's just a stream app or a data or a task, why am I having to do this? Well, through SpringCloud Dataflow, I can also create a workflow called compose tasks. So in this case, I could have I could put timestamp out here if I wanted to. Oh man, I messed that guy up, didn't I? Click X, and we can do this, drag. And now what we're telling Dataflow is run timestamp, and if timestamp is successful, run Slack boot. And through this compose tasks, I can run tasks in parallel. I can run them on conditionals. It says, hey, if it fails, go this direction. If it succeeds, goes this direction. If it returns this value, go this. You can do all sorts of conditionals using Dataflow or compose tasks. But in this case, we're just going to keep it short and sweet. It's just going to be a single task we run. And also remember in Dataflow, I don't have to do any drag and drop. If I want to do the DSL, all I have to do is this. There we go. It's up to you in which way you want to work it. So we're going to create the task. We're going to call it Slack boot task. Gee, it seems like I've tested this before. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and launch it. And there we go. And it's going to work magically, right? Well, I gave a hint. I had to set one property, and that property does not have a default, right? So what is that going to look like? So let's go look at our tasks. More importantly, let's go here. It says there was an error. What happened? How can I make a mistake? It was so easy. Well, let me see. I have an error, right? And all this information is provided by SpringCloud task. Remember what task does? It says start time, end time, duration, what was the exit code. But also for Dataflow, I can go in and see what happened. And it says, oh my gosh, your URI is not absolute. What does that mean? I forgot to put in the URI. Well, let's fix that. We want to see successes, right? So with that, I'm going to go bring up here. I'm going to show you bring home my magic Slack here. And we see that about 8:12 a.m. this morning, I gave a kickoff test on this. We see that it looked at the data at the time. So I'm going to pull that back off right now. And we're going to launch this again. Launch. And what we're going to do this time is I'm going to put in that URL. Let's see right here. Again, I'm copying pasting because when I demo, my demo skills are horrible, and therefore I make a lot of mistakes. And so I do some copy pasting instead. So in that case, we kicked it off. Dataflow says, hey, it launched with success. And we go back to task executions, and we can see that through a refresh that this time it returned 0. We can go in and take a look at this latest execution. We can take a look at the view log and see that, in fact, it was successful. And more importantly, I can bring this down, and I heard the magic clicks that said at 3:51 Eastern Standard Time that we actually had all of our applications to come, actually read that data. All right, we're going to drag this back over here real quick. And again, like through tasks, the difference between tasks and streams is we can see that the stream, we run basically I can run n number of streams out there, but really a stream has one piece to it. Now I can do all sorts of magic where I can have like 5 transforms, right? And through Dataflow, I can specify 1 HTTP to 5 transforms to 2 JDBCs. And that way you can adjust your load of how many processes you want. But with tasks being ephemeral, I can launch these as many times as I want. I can go back in and relaunch this again. And again, pop that in here and launch that task, and there we go. Another question you may ask is like, okay, Glenn, do I always have to use the UI? And the answer is no, I don't have to always use the UI. We actually can go in and take a look, and we see that, in fact, there it is. Okay, where did I do? Where'd you go? Now it's playing hide and seek with me. There we go. We can see that we actually have our reports again that where it ran a second time. There we go. And here we are. There we go. And there was another question. Okay. Okay. So here we go. And let's go ahead and do the next step. What we're going to do next is tasks. And we've done that. Okay. So what we're going to do is take a next step. And we're going to go back to our presentation. Tanzu Tuesday. Come on, you can do it. Oh, there we go. And so to finish out our conversation here. So where can I learn more about Dataflow? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to do a screenshot of this. All right, so the more you want to learn about SpringCloud Dataflow, go to dataflow.spring.io. It shows you how to install Dataflow. It shows you how to create your first SpringCloud Stream app. Even though SpringCloud Task we saw was really simple, it's just add enable task to your regular Spring Boot app. It shows you how to do all that. It even shows you how to create your first batch job if you want to take a look at it. Talks about compose tasks, all that wonderful stuff and how that works. If you're interested in looking at the SpringCloud Stream applications, here's the second link goes into that. Now remember that SpringCloud Dataflow also offers the ability to deploy to 3 different platforms, right? Your local platform, Cloud Foundry, now also Taz, right? And then also to Kubernetes. And some of the questions we get, can I deploy to, let's say, to Cloud Foundry, apps to Cloud Foundry, and also to Kubernetes at the same time? Dataflow supports that. Can I deploy multiple Kubernetes clusters or namespaces? Yes, it does that. So it's got a lot of features that are available for playing with these various scenarios. And other than that, I want to say thanks, folks. I know I got some news that we have a slight difficulty out there, that Tiffany's laptop is
It started back up. We're good.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. I was going to say, it's giving her a hiccup, but it looks like it's back alive. So, folks, was there any questions? We have about 5 minutes for questions.
I do not see any specific ones
All
in the
right,
chat right now.
no worries. Maybe I explained it so well, everybody's like odd.
I mean, I think you did a great job of explaining things.
Well, thank you. One of the other questions that we oftentimes get, let me go ahead and see if I can get my, there we go. Again, some of the questions we oftentimes get through SpringCloud data flow is, can I, or SpringCloud stream, can I have a SpringCloud stream app that pick up from, let's say AMQP or RabbitMQ and write out to Kafka topic using the binders? The answer is absolutely. Dataflow does support that, or I should say SpringCloud stream supports that. Some people will ask a question, does SpringCloud task, is it the newer version of SpringCloud or Spring Batch? The answer is no. It works with Spring Batch, right? And similarly, I get questions like, is SpringCloud Stream the replacement for Spring Integration? Actually, no, it's built on top of Spring Integration. So anything you can do with Spring Integration, you can also do in SpringCloud Stream. So that's some of the most other questions that we do get. And I think other than that, I think we're in great shape.
Yeah, and Sweet Killer and Nine says nice stuff. I joined a workshop about this a while ago from the Spring team.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you. I'm glad you had a chance to go to the workshop.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. You'll definitely have to come back for a future talk.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Yeah. And everyone, again, go to tanzu.tv, and this episode will later be on the page for this talk, and you'll be able to watch it over as many times as you want on YouTube. So
Awesome.
thanks again, everyone, and have a good rest of your day, evening, or whatever it might be.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for attending. Have a great, awesome day.